All right, so with some of the cool animated features done from the previous lesson, we'll go ahead and build on our clothes design, I think. Currently, they just feel like hollow pieces of geometry. So I'll show you a pretty clever way of adding thickness to an object without making them editable, because we want to obviously avoid that. We want to keep some of our attributes available still. And we'll also go ahead and add some other details to the clothes. So we'll hop into Cinema and get started with that. So like I mentioned previously, our clothes don't really feel like actual pieces of fabric, which is due to the fact that we don't have any thickness going on right now. They're just basically one-sided pieces of geometry. So what you could do is just make all of these editable and then just extrude them manually. However, if we would do that, we wouldn't be able to like easily change the bottom radius of our cone later on if we want to, and add or decrease segments in an easier way. We're losing a lot of the attributes that we'd like to keep for as long as possible. So another way of adding thickness to a piece of geometry, which is really handy, is adding a cloth surface is what it's called. And to activate that, we'll go ahead and have our cone selected. I'll come over here to our subdivision surface panel. I'll hold Alt and release on the cloth surface here. So now we have added our cone as a child to the cloth surface. And just doing that, nothing will happen. By default, this just adds another layer of subdivision. However, we want to set this to 0 and set the thickness of our cloth surface to 1. In doing that, you can see what happens immediately. So you can increase this to whatever you want, but I just want to have it at 1. And just doing that, the clothes won't really have the smooth kind of edge that you would like it to have. And even if we went ahead and added subdivision to this doesn't really change that. So what we want to do is add another layer of smoothing on top of the cloth surface. So not adding any subdivisions within the cloth surface, but add another layer of that. And the best way to do that is either add a form of tag that will add it later on in rendering, but we want to see what we're doing. So I'll just add a subdivision surface, which is the way you add subdivisions within Cinema 4D. So like with the cloth surface, I'll hold Alt and press this. And now you can kind of see what we have done to the smoothing here. So now we actually smooth out the edge that we added using our cloth surface here. So that's looking really good. And obviously we want to do this for all of our pieces of clothing. So I'll need to do this for the sleeves and the collar as well. But since it's so easy, we'll just go ahead and do that. So I'll head into my arm symmetry. I'll just fold these down, head to our sleeve, go into the cloth surface, hold Alt, release, set this to 0, set this to 1, and we'll add the subdivision surface. Perfect. Since we don't have as many like base segments in the sleeves as we had in the poncho, we're getting a bit of a harsh edge still, which means that we might want to add another layer of subdivisions, and you can do that either by increasing these parameters, but I'll actually go ahead and add just one layer of subdivision within our cloth surface. And if you like just play around and increase this, you can see what this is doing. I'm happy with 1, and be careful to not slide these too far, because you'll add a lot of detail to your scene, which might be heavy for your machine. But I think I'm happy at that stage. We're probably going to come back and edit these once we start to add textures and stuff. And we'll do the same for our color. So I'll just select that, come into our cloth surface, set that to 0, 1, and then add a subdivision surface like that. Perfect. Starting to look really good. And I had this kind of string wrapping around her neck in my drawing. So I'll naturally want to add that as well. And like we did for our laces, I'll add the same type of sweep, but we won't crop it like we did for the laces. So we know how to do that. We just come up to our spines here, select circle, and we'll go ahead and put that within our color null actually. I'll just zero out the coordinates while I have it put there. And I'll press T, scale it down, and I'm gonna need to rotate it about 90 degrees like that. And I'll just slightly place it somewhere around where I think it will be, around here. And we'll add a sweep. We've done that before. We'll come over here, press Alt and hold as we release on the sweep. We can copy the circle, because in my case, I want a circle to wrap around the original circle shape. And it's massive, so I'll scale it down just a bit to something around, yeah, there, 1.8. I think that looks good. And we'll want to kind of scale this and adjust it to a point where we feel happy with the placement of it. Like something like this maybe. And as you can tell, we'll need to like just move down our arms just a bit. So I'll go ahead and select our arm null, actually, not the arm symmetry. Make sure that the arm null is selected. We'll just move this down slightly in the y-axis, like that. I think we can have it slightly closer. And yeah, I don't think we needed to have it that far down. Something like that is good. We'll move up the arms just a bit again. Maybe actually move down this string. We want to basically place it so it's like in the middle where our collar and poncho meets. So somewhere around there is good, like that. And I'll just shrink it down just a bit. Okay, we're gonna be happy with that. Let's not get too stuck into the details. I also kind of want to add some form of like stone or something that she has at the front here. And I'm kind of imagining that's where the string kind of goes in and ties a knot, and then you have these pieces of string kind of flying in the wind. So we'll go ahead and create a sphere. We'll come over to our primitives, drag and let go over sphere. We'll go ahead and place that within the collar null, and I'll zero out the coordinates like always. I'll scale this down quite a bit, move it out, and kind of, we can actually place it within the sweep. So we make sure that we have it at the center of the sweep. So I'll zero out the Z in this case, and then we'll move it out again, because if we have our sphere within the sweep, it won't work. So we'll put it somewhere around there. I'll just scale it down just a bit. We'll also increase the segments, and I'll scale it down to somewhere around maybe like 3.4, something like that. Yeah, good. And to do these like pieces of string that kind of comes out of this stone that we have, we want to do this with a sweep again. And we basically just want a single line spline. So not a circle, not a rectangle, just a straight line, but where we have, you know, height attributes and where we can change the amount of segments and stuff. And as far as I know, Cinema 4D don't really have that, but what you can do is you can create a helix, which is a spline. And a helix looks like this. But if we set the start and end radius to 0, it is just a straight line. So as you can tell, if you just set the radiuses to 0, you get just a straight up line, which is what we want. So that's good. And I'll go ahead and drop this into our sphere just so we can zero out the coordinates and we place the helix where it's supposed to be. So it originates from the sphere. Great. And it's really long, as you can tell. So I'll just go ahead and change the height to somewhere around maybe, 20. Let's set it to 20 centimeters. And I'll go ahead and just rotate it out just a bit. And I'll just drag it behind the sphere. So it's, something like this. Just kind of angle it like that. And we can actually, even though this is a spline, we can still use a wind deformer. So we can actually just come over to our poncho, expand this, come down to our wind deformer, and just control, drag it, and drop it within the helix. And nothing will really happen because our helix is actually outside of this linear field, because the linear field is still applied to this wind deformer. But if I just remove the linear field from our fields tab in this wind deformer, now it will start to affect it. And if we start to move it up, we can see what it's doing. And we want to make sure that our wind deformer is originating from the center position of the helix. So I'll just zero all of these out like that. And if we drag along here, nothing will happen because the wind deformer is probably not at the right angle. But if I change to my local axis, so I hit W, which makes me available to rotate the local axis of our selected object, I'll just try and kind of rotate it to a different direction where we start to see some results here. And I think we did at 90 degrees. Yeah, we did, but I don't think it's, so we can rotate it 90 degrees in this way too, like that. And now we see some nice wind movement here. I think we can scale down the wind size here. So if we just drag this along, you'll see what this is doing. Maybe I want to place it somewhere around like 7 or 8. Let's try that. Yeah, that feels good. And since we still have this frequency at 10, it will loop like the other wind deformers, so we don't need to worry about that. And with that moving and looking good, we can go ahead and put this into a sweep. So I'll come over here again, hold Alt, release on sweep. We can actually go ahead and duplicate this circle so we get the same thickness. So I'll just Control drag this up to our sweep. Let go. And we also want some rounded caps on this. So I'll come into this sweep, hit caps, and we'll just increase that and increase these segments like that. Perfect. It's looking great. And I'll kind of just angle this to a point where I'm happy with it. And as I mentioned previously, I also want 2 of them. So while I have this sweep selected, I can just go ahead and Control, rotate and drag like this. And we'll just put this at a placement where we're kind of happy with the composition here, something like this. But as you can see, since we have 2 identical wind deformers in both of these, you're getting a very uniform and like non-realistic motion here. So what we can do is just change the size just a bit. So the wind size is a bit smaller on the other one, which means that it won't be completely in sync. So yeah, something like that. We can't really change our frequency because that will, if I were to, for example, maybe change this to 12, this won't be looping. So we need to have it at 10 at all times. So let's set that back to 10. But I'm pretty happy with something like this. Maybe I'll increase the size just a bit. Maybe set this size to 9, just so we have some form of variation going on. But I'm thinking this is starting to look really good. I'll maybe move this out just a bit. Something like that. Yeah, it's looking good. Maybe I'll move it in just a bit like that too. Great. Yeah, starting to look really epic. And as you maybe remember from my drawing, I kind of had this zipper line thing going through our poncho here. So I'll obviously want to add that. So the easiest way for us to do that is to create a capsule and just place it roughly along the side of the poncho. So before doing that, I'll just go ahead and deactivate our bend and displacer and the wind deformer, just so we can kind of roughly navigate where the zipper will be placed. So I'll go ahead and create a capsule like that. I'll drag it up, make it a lot thinner. I want to have it the same thickness as the strings that we just made. So I believe they are 1.8. So I'll do the same for our capsule, 1.8. And as far as the length, I'll just scale that down just a bit. And I'll come ahead and drag it out in the SED. And here we just need to kind of eyeball this just a bit. So I'll just rotate it, something like this. Drag it out in the SED. It's kind of, maybe we can switch to another view just to see this a bit more precisely. I think I kind of dialed it in almost perfectly first time. Nice one, me. Maybe just a bit out. Like that. I'm kind of just watching the edges go along here, so I want to align them roughly around the same placement. And I want the caps to kind of go just below the edge of our poncho here. So with that, I think we can hop back into our viewport here. I'll maybe want to move this out just so it's lying on top of our poncho. Something like that. If we go ahead and activate our deformers now, so if I, for example, if I activate the bend deformer, now you can see that our capsule doesn't follow along with the deformation here. So to solve that, we can just drag our capsule into our cone here. And if we do that, you can see that, great, it is following the deformation. And if we, for example, turn on the wind deformer, it will kind of follow along like this. So that's great. But we do have a clot surface here. So we are adding some additional thickness and subdivision for our capsule, which we don't necessarily want. We want to have this capsule not be affected by the cloth surface. But at the same time, we want the capsule to be affected by all of these deformers, obviously, because we want it to follow the shape of our poncho. So a way around that is to actually group our cloth surface here. So we'll just group that into a null, hit Alt-G. And now we can actually take the capsule, the linear field, and all of our deformers and drag them out to this null that we just created. So now you can see that all of our deformers and stuff are within the same null that we just created from our cloth surface, but the capsule and all of our deformers are not placed inside of our cone, which isn't really necessary. So if we go ahead and reactivate our cloth surface first, and then we, for example, activate our wind deformer, now we can see that the cloth surface is just affecting the cone, which is exactly what we want. So this doesn't really affect the capsule anymore because it's not placed within the cone, but all of our deformers are still affecting the entire poncho shape. So that is exactly what we wanted to do with that. So with that, we can actually go ahead and take a look at our segments. So I'll just go ahead and turn on the lines. And as you can see here, we have a lot more segments in the height of our poncho here. And if I just go ahead and decrease the height segments for our capsule, you can see that we need these segments for the wind deformer and the displacer to do its work. So I'll just go ahead and increase the segments of our capsule so it just roughly aligns with the amount of segments I have on my cone here. So maybe something like this. Yeah, I'll set the height segments to 19 and the rotation segments to 12, and that will work, I think. As long as it feels as if the capsule is following the shape of the poncho, that's all right. And as you can tell, I haven't activated our displacer because this will actually do some crazy stuff to our capsule. So don't be scared if things look a bit crazy once you do this, because this won't be the result that we want. And there are two things that we need to fix with this. Firstly, we'll need to head into our displacer, into shading, and back into the noise. And we'll need to change the space here from texture to world, because currently it's taking the noise and projecting it locally where we have the displacer affected. And we'll actually want to set this from texture to world, because that means that basically the noise will be placed in a world coordinate, which means that it will affect the poncho and our zipper here within the same kind of value. So immediately once I do that, you'll kind of see that it still follows the shape, but we're still getting some really, really wonky results. And that is because we'll need to head into object panel of our displacer and change the direction from vertex normal to spherical. And this will just change the way that our displacer is being projected and displacing the objects. So if we change from vertex normal to spherical, this will kind of solve things for us. So now we still have it affecting the zipper and the poncho, but not giving us these crazy results. So with that in place, that's looking really, really nice. So I think we can move on from there. So yeah, we've added another layer of detail to our clothes. They're starting to look really, really cool. And we will be adding a few more things, but that's later down the line. And with this, I'll leave you and see you in the next lesson.